Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom. Welcome, everybody, to another webinar sponsored by the Faith-Based Online Learning Directors and co-hosted by WCAT Radio, which is a production of En Route Books and Media, which comes out of Holy Apostles College and Seminary in Cromwell, Connecticut. As well, we are hosted by Tyndale University College and Seminary, where we have Dr. Lawrence Hopperton, who is the Director of Distributed Learning. Dr. Hopperton was formerly the Director of Research for the Canadian Telelearning National Centre of Excellence and Senior Instructional Designer for the Canadian Centre of Excellence for Refugee and Immigrant Studies. And after Dr. Hopperton's presentation, he will be available for questions for those people who are joining us in one way or another. We look forward to having you with us during this presentation. So, Dr. Hopperton, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure, Sebastian. Thank you for the introduction.
Certainly.
Okay, well, what I'd like to talk about today is flipped classrooms. The last webinar I presented was on the idea of distributed learning. This is now focusing in on the continuum of distributed learning and say, how can we make best use of it? So it's called flipped classrooms, reshaping curriculum for engagement and learning. Let me start with distributed learning and the flipped class. The flipped classroom lies on the spectrum of distributed learning. Distributed learning is a continuum with 19th and 20th century classroom models at one end and completely online multimedia and multimodal presentations at the other. Under the definition of distributed learning, any course that uses any aspect of technology in its delivery is on the distributed learning continuum. This can be as simple as posting a syllabus online to the application of virtual reality. But the flipped classroom doesn't define a specific point on that spectrum. Rather, it describes the best use of resources, including technology, to maximize the learning experience of the student and the achievement of learning outcomes. The blending of technology and teaching in the flipped classroom provides the flexibility for the professor, the student, and the program. As I say, there is no one definition of flipped classrooms. The most broad definition was drafted by the Sloan C Foundation in 2007, and it states, courses integrate online with traditional face-to-face activities in a planned, pedagogically valuable manner, and a portion, institutionally defined, of face-to-face time is replaced by online activity. The general agreement is that a flipped classroom provides pre-recorded audio-video presentations followed by in-class activity. Students view the content material before class so that the freed lecture time can be devoted to interaction, including question and answers, discussions, exercises, or other learning activities. Flipped classrooms refers to any teaching model that replaces in-class lecture with pre-developed media elements, with the goal to use freed up time for elaboration, interactivity, and student-centered customization. It involves an integration of online and face-to-face instruction in order to promote engagement and improve outcomes. These are really broad definitions. The flipped classroom involves the identification of learning elements so as to integrate online and synchronous activities for their best purposes in order to promote engagement and student learning. It blends physical and online activities in order to create an optimal learning experience for the purpose of improving outcomes. According to the systematic instructional design model, which the one I basically use, Dick and Carey, the pedagogical plan recommends that institutions and faculty consider the variables of learning and incorporate each variable for its greatest effect. This challenges our traditional perception of post-secondary education, questioning the assumption of the preeminence of the classroom, to what is the best use of resources for learning. Is lecturing the best use of limited classroom time, or is it only a current reality? This is a question of the best application of resources, given the requirements of credit course delivery. Since the flipped classroom is defined as a spectrum along a continuum, the question becomes the variables involved in the placement of a learning instance along the spectrum. How can we maximize the impact of each variable in order to augment student learning? Lecturing in the classroom is largely passive, professor-focused activity. While there may be opportunity for some student questions, discussion is often limited by the time required to transfer knowledge. Active learning opportunities provide for increased engagement and interaction in a learner-centered environment, including connectedness, collaboration, access, and convenience. The flipped classroom allows faculty and designers to consider the best delivery mode for every academic element in order to optimize outcomes and both student and faculty satisfaction. There are distinct advantages to incorporating the flipped classroom into the curriculum. Since these approaches are designed to leverage the use of online and face-to-face settings in ways that support knowledge, understanding, and transfer, they can lead to a more efficient use of class time, which can become focused on elaboration rather than basic knowledge. And interactive learning activities such as discussions, group work, and the application of knowledge. Instruction can either begin in the classroom and continue online, or begin online and continue in the classroom. If online discussion forums are included in the instructional design, these faculty-facilitated discussions provide equal access to the content and the professor at the convenience of the student. In addition, the design can also include video conferencing, podcasting, reflective journaling, and other digital elements. These are all positive features for the student, but they do come at a cost, particularly with compressed teaching periods. Students must take direct and personal responsibility for their own learning and be familiar with the materials presented through the alternative media. For faculty, since the design process considers the best use of each learning element, it provides a new flexibility for achieving optimal student outcomes that are consistent with those expected of students in regular or fully online classes. Teaching methods need to be adjusted, and the computer-mediated elements of the course need to be created and produced before the launch of class. These elements could include voice-over PowerPoint lectures, video lectures, online forums, poster materials, basically you name it. If we can put it online, we can use it. For these classrooms, though, faculty will require some training and developmental and systematic support. It is a somewhat new process to ask them to step out of their role as lecturer. Fortunately, once the flip has been created, it can be reused the next time the course is offered, since the core knowledge remains fairly stable over time, while elaboration and customization to the individual group of students is more fluid. I should point out here, I mentioned Dick and Carey as the main instructional design approach that I use. There is a secondary approach that is involved here, and that is Charles Reigluth's elaboration theory. Very oversimplifying it, Reigluth says that we should be presenting an epitome of what we're trying to teach, and then elaborate upon it. The flipped classroom allows us to do that. In that online material, we can create the epitome of the learning and use the classroom for the elaboration upon it, elaboration and customization to our student body. As I've said, as designers of the flipped classroom, we need to consider the best use of each alternative and to design our courses accordingly. As a faculty member, what can I do with this flexible alternative form in order to enhance the learning experience? What is the most efficient and effective use of each variable given the institutional constraints and our focus on student-centered learning? Under the flipped classroom, a course is not about the delivery of content within a prescribed environment, but is learning focused upon self-motivation and responsibility within the requirements of the institution. This requires intentional course design and the scheduling and production of media elements within the required adherence to institutional standards specified through common learning outcomes for all instances of the same course. In the distributed learning applications at Tyndale, it is assumed that if two professors teach the same course with identical outcomes, there will be variation in the presentation. Distributed learning at Tyndale incorporates an 80-20 guideline. Basically, 80% of the content is consistent across all sections, regardless of their delivery mode, and is sufficient for the successful achievement of the learning outcomes. And 20% of content is variable, dependent upon the faculty member. Time for completing a course is an easy comparison to use when comparing face-to-face classes to compressed flipped classrooms. The Carnegie unit provides a method for calculating student hours required for a course. In essence, Carnegie says each hour spent in class will require 3 hours of student work outside of class. Using that model, a face-to-face class providing 2.5 hours per week for 12 weeks, this presents a commitment of 30 classroom hours plus 90 additional required hours outside of the classroom, totaling 120 hours in order to achieve the learning outcome. This is the time model that we should consider for bringing to the compressed or flipped class format. Although we may have shortened the duration of the course, the time required for success has really not changed. And I'll come back to this. The flipped classroom is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It assumes that faculty will bring their individual approaches to the developmental process and application. As a result, the general model says that the incorporated technology is flexible. For compressed classes delivered in limited time frames, it retains the basic time commitments of students while providing faculty with the opportunity to contextualize learning for individual classes. I'd now like to just point out a couple of approaches that we're using at Tyndale with our flipped classes. First of all, in the seminary, where we have developed 36 online courses, the interesting thing that I've observed happening is a transfer from the online to the regular face-to-face classes. A professor who teaches an online course will pick up that course and use it in the face-to-face classes without the discussion forums. That's a piece that the classroom has maintained. But the basic content delivery has been moved to an alternative method. It's very interesting to see. The student satisfaction is, well, there's been no complaints. It appears very high according to the student evaluations. At Tyndale University, the other side of things, the flipped classroom is being introduced now as an opportunity to expand enrollment. Let me be really specific here. We have a program, it's called the modular program. And what the modular program does is provide full credit courses in 5-week units. So we take a 12-week course and compress it to 5 weeks. And hopefully we can get the content through. The reality is faculty consistently complain that within the 5-week window, there is insufficient time to deliver full curriculum. And as a result, students are receiving a watered down version of a credit. The content is watered down. The credit itself is common. And I think this presents a significant problem. The solution that we have introduced this semester says, let us take material out of the class and let the classroom be used for elaboration and student-centered discussions. In the first instance, we began with something that everyone does, a syllabus review. Typically takes about a half hour, and that's dead time in the classroom. That's been moved into the online learning system, and students are expected to go through it before they attend class. They're expected to come with questions, not expecting full presentation. In addition, in the first class on global Christianity, the professor provided about a 15-minute overview of each week to contextualize the reading and the other elements that students are expected to go through before coming to the class. There were also sections where we took digital materials and posted them. For example, there was an interview with John Stott that we used. In the past, it's been played in class. Now it's played before class, and students come to discuss. There was an extensive video on Christianity in Africa, actually about 2 hours worth of material. And again, it was shown in class. Now it's not. Students are expected to view it before coming to class, and then they're expected to be able to discuss it with the faculty member. That was our very first flipped class in the university. The student evaluations have come back very positive, and I have a nice, happy professor as a result of it. Our second class looks at doctrines of Christian theology. And this time, while we expanded the syllabus review and the introductions, we also included online forums for each week. This being said, class is no longer an event. It's now a continuum because it starts before the meeting, it continues through the meeting, and continues then into the online discussions. Our professor, we used voice over PowerPoint using Camtasia to record. He is very happy with the results, as are the students. Now, Tyndale University has traditionally considered all of our students to be residential. And for that reason, online learning never really took off at the university the way it did at the seminary. Faculty would say, if our students are residential, why do we want that? And the result is, of course, well, they're residential now, but what's going to happen in 10 years? The flipped classroom is a starting point. What I'm planning on doing next with it is taking it into a synchronous classroom using something like a Zoom application, so that not only are we reaching our residential people, we're providing an additional service to people outside of the school. Rather than needing to drive in to a 4-hour class on a Thursday night, students can stay at home and Zoom in. And it opens up the opportunity for students outside of our geographical area. Tyndale, of course, draws students from around the world. And now we have a method to take full credit courses from the university out to the world. It's rather an exciting situation. But I always keep in mind the idea of that continuum. And so, can we move a class, a professor, step by step down the curriculum in gentle, easy steps, and eventually get them fully online? I believe we can. Secondly, with online courses, they can be easily readjusted to a flipped classroom. So we have resources that we can bring to this to expand the potential offerings. I should point out that our modular program represents about 30 different credits. It's also used for a degree completion program if students need an extra credit or two. All of these things start talking about flexible time commitments and flexible learning for the student. I've recently taken a full plunge into flipped classrooms for the university side. There are programs that are requiring an academic overhaul. They're simply not up to snuff. And the flipped classroom is providing us with the flexibility to enhance the learning of the students within compressed courses and achieving the actual learning outcomes. It's also providing us with a step forward towards a more distributed population. In our seminary, online and distributed learning accounts for up to 40% of the enrollment semester after semester. In the university side, it really doesn't. They have never jumped aboard the online to any significant extent until now. But they finally realized that if they want the expanded enrollment, we have to reach a new market that lies outside of our geographical area.
Definitely.
And so that's what we're attempting to do. In my next budget for next year, we're planning on doing at least 4 of them. That'll make a total of 6 in a year and a half, along with between 4 and 8 fully online courses. So I'm going to be a busy guy. Are there any questions or comments that people would like to bring up?
Well, like I said, I know over here, we're running an online degree program as well. One of the things that we're starting to notice on the on-campus side, one, because we have a shrinking faculty, at least a shrinking, permanent faculty, is that we're not able to have multiple sections of courses like we used to in the past.
Yes.
Good old days, you may have a Hebrew Bible class that meets in the morning, one that meets in the afternoon, and one that meets at night. Well, with the shrinking faculty and a growing number of student population who work full time.
Yes.
Basically, we did a survey this past semester, and we pretty much have determined that we're going to, at least from the on-campus courses that we're still going to be running on campus, we're going to start concentrating at night.
Makes a lot of sense.
Because, what's the use of, we schedule classes that meet in the morning or meet in the afternoon, and then all the on-campus students try to jump into the online class because they don't want to fall behind in their matriculation, but they also know that they can't be in class at that time because they're actually working. So definitely seeing a move towards more online, but also move towards even on campus, change the way that things are done to better accommodate the situation of the growing audience is definitely something that needs to be paid attention to.
Yes, it does. I look at the flipped classroom as something of an intermediary.
Yeah.
In that, especially when you have faculty that are hesitant to get involved, it's a step to get them at least going.
Right.
And then once we have them on the continuum of distributed learning, now it's simply a matter of moving them progressively forward in the application. And we've had very, very strong success using Zoom and synchronous classes.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, as an example with the Pentecostal program that we teach here, we will typically be running 3 sections simultaneously. One being a fully face-to-face, one being a Zoom-based approach, and the third being a fully online approach where we will lift the lecture out of the Zoom presentation and then post it directly into the online course.
Yeah. On your school, have you guys gone to Zoom account, the education account? Yeah, we just moved to that last year. So, so every faculty member's got a Zoom account. Every student has a Zoom account.
Yes.
Because we're trying to encourage students to use it to communicate with each other. As well as, one of the good things about Zoom is it's a perfect way for students to easily use the technology to, like I said, create those presentation assignments where they can do, a talking head or even a lecture type presentation and turn it in so we can change up from just doing the same old papers.
Exactly.
Right.
It really strikes me that the education model is due for change. We're looking at something that was really brought in Middle Ages and Renaissance, this idea of professor at the front of the classroom lecturing.
Right.
But that's a passive, empty vessel kind of approach. And what I look at with things like the flipped classroom or the fully online is we're changing the nature of learning from being an event-based situation, i.e. in the classroom with the professor, to a process that takes place over an extended period of time.
Right.
and gives the student greater opportunity to reflect before they have to say anything, to be more considered in their own statements, and ultimately learn more.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm working hard over here trying to do over here, as far as trying to change trying to get faculty to realize that they got to change their pedagogy and their teaching styles.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, the teaching style that most faculty are used to doing was basically became popular at a time where resources were limited.
Yes.
So the instructor was the one who had the resources and tried to distribute that information and knowledge to as many people as possible at a single time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now we have, trying to get people to think of more net-friendly type teaching styles, just because, obviously information is more abundant, their
Yes.
access to it is more abundant. So getting them to now, the instructors, the teacher, to change their teaching style, because the students have the ability now to access more information or have access, and can do more things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times so the faculty should become more that facilitator, more
Yes, exactly.
the person that just a talking head, more than the distributor, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think too that, with the students these days, I've run into with faculty resistance, the kind of statement of, our students don't know how to use computers that well. And, I hear them say that, and it's like, what you're actually saying is you don't know how to use the computer that well. The students do.
Right.
Yeah, especially in the year 2019. So we're entering college these days were born in 2000.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Their expectations are that the computer is going to be used.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, which makes this an easy introduction to the students because you're giving them what they're expecting anyway.
Right.
And it says that we need to focus on the faculty resistance.
Yeah.
Well, that would be the thing. Students these days are used to the internet that logs onto them. So, for instance, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, when they make a post and when they engage in a conversation online, if somebody responds to it, they see it automatically in their feed.
Yes.
If the learning management systems could be designed in a very similar way, and there are some that do this rather well, they're community-based or community-oriented, so that when students respond to a message board, any response back to them shows up on their feed. That's going to enable them to engage their groups and their classes and their lessons in a way that they're already comfortable engaging in their social relationships.
Mm-hmm. Right. Bring the education to the learner, not the learner to the education.
Right.
Right. And Roland, you were talking earlier about the scheduling is the issue. When I gave my first talk on distributed learning back in 1998, I went to the University of Roanoke in Virginia, or University of Virginia at Roanoke, the talk. And as I was preparing to give my talk, a presenter just before me stood up and gave a talk and said, interestingly, 98% of the students who are in our online courses live on campus. They weren't taking the classes because of issues of distance. They were taking them because of issues of scheduling. And that's the thing to address in a very mobile, mobile device kind of world in which we live. The students are doing these classes from their iPhone.
Right.
Or other personal devices. Right. So it does mean that we have to transform the way educators see these tools as means through which they can continue to operate professionally. And I would think that in the past, we tended to divide professional and meta-professional skill sets. So the professional skill set was the person comes out of college, having had, he's newly minted PhD, He's had no courses in education and no courses in social media necessarily.
Right.
He goes into a classroom and finds himself confronted by students, and he addresses those students in the way that he learned or she learned.
Right. And what their instructor taught them. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So suddenly, these schools in which they're teaching are moving into distributed learning simply to stay alive in a world where the person who lives in Roanoke doesn't really have to be bound by the opportunities for education in Roanoke. That person can be attending online colleges anywhere around the world.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what happens is the professor is asked by his or her academic dean or department chair, we want you to teach this course online. We understand it's a meta-professional skill set. So we're going to teach you things like online course management, discussion board, proactive activity, various tools, how to use PowerPoint, how to create a video, whatever. It will give you a instructional technologist or an instructional designer who's going to help you develop and build this course. And all of that is treated like a meta-professional skill set.
Mm-hmm.
I think the future is going to require us to shift from understanding the way faculty teach online as a meta-professional skill set to understanding that as a professional skill set.
Yeah.
It's going to make all the difference.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that's one of the things that, I try to do when I'm creating new faculty development training is try to use more, try to introduce them to teaching styles and learning theories that are more, again, net friendly. We talk a lot more about, pedagogy as much as we now talk about pedagogy or andragogy, is because, we're dealing with the self-determined learner and their access to information, and how the instructor now has to learn to manage those learners and meet those learners' expectations through the use of, the technologies that are available.
Yes. Yes.
But it's like that. It doesn't happen overnight. We all know that.
Right.
Oh, it sure doesn't.
And that's just because, again, I laugh because I teach an education technology class in a teacher certification program. And usually one of the first things I tell my students is that they're going to learn more about teaching to go into a kindergarten classroom than a lot of their other instructors have ever had before they started teaching them in the courses that they're learning at the university. Yeah, that's just the truth. So
it is.
When you're talking about the faculty development side, it's trying to introduce faculty into more effective ways of teaching a course. Sometimes it means teaching them to get outside of their comfort zone, or allowing them enough ability or enough access to training so they can overcome whatever fear they have. Because a lot of times they don't have a fear of technology, they have a fear of looking like they don't know what they're doing in front of a classroom.
Yes, I've run into that too.
Right, yeah.
You've got that very delicate ego to work with.
Right.
Well, speaking of delicate egos and speaking of this not happening overnight, I would like to challenge the entire profession of faculty who teach in our theological schools with this one fact. In the year 1999 and 2000, the Lilly Foundation, through the Wabash Institute in Crawfordsville, Indiana, offered 72 theological schools $300,000 grants. And the theological schools in 1999 and 2000 invested those grants in the retrofitting of their infrastructures and the hiring of educational technologists, in the development of IT systems, etc. All those wonderful things that came out in the years that followed were a product in part of those grants. Now, some schools, of course, were doing this prior to the offer of those grants, which is what made those grants something that 72 schools wanted to jump on.
Right.
Now, that was 1999. Now, we are in the year 2019. So take all those 50-year-old theology professors that we currently have walking up and down the halls of our theology schools. They were 30 when it came out. Okay, wonderful. Let's give them a pass. Let's give all 30-year-olds in the year 1999 a pass because they've just gotten out of college. They've learned their professional skill sets. So now we have our theology schools becoming populated with people in their late 20s and early 30s and early 40s. Now, these are people who entered into their graduate school roughly in the year, 2005 or 2010?
Yeah.
Or completed their doctoral studies in those years. These are people who cannot have a pass.
No, they cannot.
The reason they cannot have the pass at age 27 or 30 or 40 even is because they're going to be in the school doing their theology stuff, doing their professional skills of research and of teaching. If those people are going to be teaching for another 27 years at age 40, or another 37 years at age 30, or another 40 years as newly minted PhDs at age 27, get no pass. There's not such a thing as a delicate ego. They do it or they do it not.
Right.
You know, there's the Yoda principle comes into play here.
It's the same principle that was the whole publisher parish is still alive. It's just, you know, what you need to learn in order to survive has changed.
Right. So, I mean, publisher parish has a different meaning now than 30 years ago or 20 years ago. In the past, it was peer-reviewed journals or books.
Right.
Well, now we've got peer-reviewed online journals. Now we've got books that faculty themselves publish through Amazon, you know, KDP. The means of production have come down to the level of a faculty member to a school. So I built a publishing house at Holy Apostles, and we've published 100 Catholic books in the past 5 years.
Right.
I built, you know, for those who want to be on the radio and for those who want to promote whatever projects they're doing or promote their own institutions, I built a radio station. And we now run 60 shows a week. And this show is on that radio station right now. You can log into wcatradio.com and listen to it as I speak. So faculty members who say, oh, you know, I'm 40 years old, I didn't grow up with these technologies, are really being disingenuous in what it is that they have the ability to do if they applied themselves to saying, hey, this is the world in which we live. I'm going to master this world.
Right.
Because what's going to happen is 20 years from now, if they're still putting their heads in the sand, it's not a question of stroking their egos or dealing with delicate egos. It's a question of saying, look, dude, it's not publish or perish. It's a or perish.
Yeah. Schools will just be like, we can't use you. You don't have these skill sets. We just can't use you.
Exactly. And it's not going to matter that they published 30 books in the past and they've become an icon, you know. Okay, fine. Let's find a different way to use your skills because teaching is not going to be one of them.
Right.
Yes, very true. I've always figured, I've been involved in this since the 80s, that all you have to do is wait for that generation to retire. Because the next generation coming in, as you're saying, Sebastian, is already technically literate. They're all ready to do it. And I'm seeing schools now making it a condition of employment.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, we do.
Any new faculty that we hire have to have a certain skill set and technology.
Yes.
Because if not, we can't use them.
Exactly.
Right.
You know, once a classroom's full, it's full, but online you can open another section and there's no problems.
Right.
But anyway, this is the world we're faced with, and this idea of flipped classrooms is very important because it does give us, in a presentation that I gave earlier, it does give us the opportunity, I said, for us to teach faculty these metaprofessional skill sets, at least those that didn't come in with them, in a low-impact environment that enables us to transition them into online teaching.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, it's also one where they can see an immediate benefit.
Sure.
You know, if they're complaining that there's not enough time to teach, well, then let's teach differently.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's what are you doing? It's better classroom management. How are you spending that 3 hours of classroom time?
Yes.
Yeah. If you're spending it all that time, you know, where you're spending three literally classroom days so students can present presentations, where students can create the presentations and post them online, and then you can actually use your classroom for discussions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. I mean, I go through all the time. It drives me crazy when a faculty member shows a movie during the class period.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, that's just laziness.
Right.
mean, yeah, because if you're going to spend literally 2 classroom periods to show a video or show a movie, I'm not saying that video or movie is not important, but you've used your time wrong, because you could post that video, say, students, watch this, and then when you come into class, you can have you can use a more dynamic discussion period, because students can come in prepared.
Right. But you see, that's the mentality.
In the classroom, it's just about how you're using that time, how
Right.
you contact time.
Right. Well, that's the mentality, Roland, is that in the 20th century, the only time that they could guarantee that all of their students would be able to watch a video and have
Right.
it go to watch is to bring it to the class and share the class time with them.
Right.
But in the age of Netflix, such is no longer the case.
Right.
Or
Well,
you,
and even in some cases, I mean, like I said, I know here, even if it's not Netflix, you know, if you got an LMS, you know, you can still share video if you own it. You know, I use the same fair use policies. I'll lock it down so they can't download it, but they can only view it. Make it only available for a certain period of time. Yeah, and then I'll put the video online.
right. Now, in your capacity, Roland, you're an educational technologist working inside of your institution. Is that right?
Yes, that's what that.
So that's what a professor who would need your insights, would need your ideas to provide him or her with that kind of solution to a problem that he or she otherwise might have. They say, well, you know, there's no way for me to show this video unless I do it in class. But there are educational technologists or instructional designers in most of our seminaries these days. And if they're not, find the librarian, because the librarian will know how to do this, post a video on YouTube or on a password-protected website for students.
Right.
I mean, this is stuff we knew in 2004.
Yes.
15 years ago, how to do. When some of these faculty members were still in high school, we've entered a new generation. The new generation, even 50-year-olds, should no longer have a pass. They should understand that the way educational activities are happening these days requires a merge of the meta-professional skill sets where they know who to ask the question of with the professional skill sets. Alone is going to transform the way we do theology in our education institutions.
I do think you're correct there. I think we're watching the transformation happening. It's only going to accelerate.
Yeah. I think that the problem is that sometimes, again, different areas of study, and theology just happens to be one of those where they, for a long time, their argument to not using technology was spiritual formation or some other.
Oh, I've heard that one.
But the reality is that, you can be just as creative with technology as you can be when you're doing stuff in the classroom. It's just a matter sometimes having to think a little bit outside the box.
Sure. That's a very strong point. In theological schools, we do more than just intellectual formation. We do human and spiritual formation. But look at anything that Steve and Mary Lowe have written, and you see it's possible. That there are those out there, the information on how to do this thing already exists. It's a matter of finding it, applying it to one's particular faith tradition, and engaging one's students in that way. When I was an instructional technologist myself at Kendrick Lennon Seminary, I found that the scripture scholars were always the most advanced, not just at our seminary, but in all the seminaries, because they were always looking at new ways or better ways to interact with text. And interacting with text is facilitated in the technologies that we have available to us. The people who were most resistant were pastoral theologians or pastoral counselors, people who said, no, we really need the face-to-face engagement and the tacit learning. But you would see them on telephones or on Skype sometimes talking to their students. It wasn't so much a distrust or fear of the way in which technology could be used. What they wanted was synchronous engagement as opposed to asynchronous engagement.
Right.
Right.
Lots of ways to engage through appropriate tools synchronously. As all of these online programs that have sprouted up, there's almost 200 of them now that have institutions in the world of ATS that have been approved for comprehensive online learning.
Yeah.
And that list is growing every year. This is being done with or without the participation of faculty who say, just let me age out. And they're age 50. That's 17 more years of their aging out. And
that's right.
The institution won't be able to afford to keep them.
That's very true. As the enrollments shift, the dinosaurs are going to die off.
Well, hopefully there'll be a soft landing for them. They'll find other things to do that are more in speed with the professional skill sets they believe that they have.
Well, I would hope so, but I'm also arguing here that if a faculty member is posting their syllabus online, they're on the continuum. Now we start moving them along it. But that first step to even get them to post it online can be a big one.
Right, and so that's why somebody like Rollin is necessary in an institution.
Yes.
Even in the year 2019. So, Rollin, I think you've got some job security ahead of you for some time.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, all right. So we do have a little bit more time in our hour, and Rollin, thank you very much for being here, because that's made this conversation all the more important and profitable and delightful.
Yes, thank you very much.
Larry, is there anything that you would like to say in terms of closing?
No, other than we are looking at a transformation of education underway. I remember back in the 80s, you say online to people and they would stand up in front of you and say, it sounds all nice and good, but it won't work. That has changed entirely. And I think that as we move forward, we're going to see a continual inversion of the enrollment to the point where online and distributed learning as a whole is accounting for larger and larger percentages of enrollment. Mm-hmm. Now, for us, this means we need to get involved. We need to start building products and approaches and start moving our faculty along the curriculum in order to accommodate these people. I know that here in Canada, one of the areas I'm looking at is the far north. Haven't quite gotten there yet, but part of it is what comes first, getting to the north or getting the product together. And I think getting the product's first step. Then we can expand enrollment.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of interesting, because I think that when you're dealing with online technology, this is probably the first time in educational history where the faculty seems to be the last one to buy in. Usually, where it's the administration, I think a lot of times when you're dealing with online learning, a lot of administrations saw the writing on the wall pretty early on, mm-hmm. on needing to adopt it to survive, especially in a more competitive teaching world.
Yes,
because students can shop better. Students can say, "Hey, I'm going to go here because this school's going to meet the needs that I have, meet my personal needs as well as my academic needs." Mm-hmm. So in the past, where the buy-in was always had to drag the administration kicking and screaming, the last ones in the room. This time, I think when you're dealing with online and dealing with technology implementation, as far as using it in, embedding it into education, that faculty is the last one.
Yes.
It's kind of, probably the first time that's ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a little weird sometimes because you do have a good set of faculty. I mean, in a lot of ways, there's a civil war coming, or if we're not already in it. You have a large number of faculty, a growing number of faculty who have embraced technology. Usually those are the ones who or actively know that they want to teach for the next 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
They know they have to learn that. They know they have to learn those skills. Versus faculty members who are still, have an aversion to implementing technology for whatever reason, whether it's they don't understand it themselves. They're just a little nervous because they know that their aptitude for implementing or learning those technologies may be a little slower, but starting to see it now that there is an actual divide. You have a group of faculty members who wholeheartedly embrace it, and another set that are just totally against it.
Yes.
I think that's the teaching those habits, such as flipping a classroom, is the way that you gain more faculty on the for it side.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of faculty members who do enjoy teaching will see the benefits of using the instructional time or the classroom time, where you can actually do more discussion and work versus the presentations and the videos and all those other things that can now be shifted to another time where that's out of class.
Yes exactly.
Yeah. Jim Rafferty, I met back in 99 or 2000, whenever we began this initiative, was an educational technologist for 5 schools up in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area, which had come together and combined their grants. So that all 5 of the schools had $300,000. They combined them into $1.5 million, and they used that to support all 5 schools.
Yeah.
So Jim came upon an insight. He said, a name to call what it is that you're describing, Roland, is anapulstrophobia. Anapulstrophobia is the fear of not covering all of the material. So it's a made-up word, and he said if some of this material could be shifted into other media, then faculty could deal, and that would be a natural groove with which to engage faculty.
Yeah.
The opportunity, you would tell them, to be able to cover all of their material and do it in style with student engagement and student participation in the covering of that material.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have a couple of minutes left. Any final thoughts from anybody before we close the webinar? And
no, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming along. I've enjoyed the discussion.
Yeah, enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, then, from all of us at the Faith-Based Online Learning Directors and WCAT Radio and Holy Apostles College and Seminary and Tyndale, our University and College Seminary, thank you for participating, and we hope to see you back next week for another webinar delivered by our very own Dr. Vicki Dunham. We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.